Hello, 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 everyone. This is the freshest episode of Present Perfect Podcast. And today I have a pleasure and honor of having Nadine with me. Nadine is a financial expert. She is a coach in financial matters, focusing on women.
Thank you for having me.
Nadine, thank you so much for coming. And since you are focusing on women and personal finance for women, let's start from the biggest question. What is the difference between men and women in terms of financial behavior in Switzerland?
It's mainly that they don't have the confidence to start usually, or they don't have the confidence to be as invested as they should be.
And why is it even important to start?
You only build wealth if you have assets. And if you only are holding your money basically in cash, the inflation will eat it all up.
You say that they are lacking confidence to start, but how do you build confidence to start?
Yeah, honestly, by doing. The problem with that is it's so much easier if you have really little.
That sounds so contradictory.
Yeah. If you have like already quite a lot of money because you haven't been investing or you've inherited or something, then you start with suddenly having so much, and then there's so much at risk, right? You've already started anyway. Like if you're running around in Switzerland and you have a purse, where a wallet in your, or like a digital wallet in nowadays on our phones, right? If you have assets in there, so you have like cash in there, you're invested in cash, in the currency that you have in your portemonnaie.
That is actually a brilliant thought.
So
because you're investing anyways, even if you don't know that you're investing.
Yes.
You're investing in Forex, not Forex. You're investing in Swiss francs if you have the Swiss francs with you.
And that's not necessarily an asset class that you want to hold a lot of assets in, not because it's Swiss francs. Swiss francs is strong currency, usually at least. But it's because the inflation can get to that asset class.
But for those who are just starting, I understand that all situations are different. And of course, we cannot give a general advice here. And we are not giving any financial advice in this podcast at all. But for people who now want to start, and you say they build confidence by starting, what would be your, let's say, safe or risk-averse solution?
So it's always a good idea if you start building your knowledge first. Generally, if you have debt, you need to first pay off debt. So debt being bad debt. Bad debt is all debt that has like, let's say above like 4.5%, 5% of interest rate. So your house loan, if you own a house, ain't considered bad debt. But your credit card loan is considered bad debt. So that's the things that you shouldn't be carrying because that compounds really fast. Compounding is a fancy word for saying it just grows extremely fast. If you have 100 francs and it compounds at 10%, then you have 110 next year. But the year after, you are already at 121 because that's the compounding effect.
See how we are building the knowledge in this podcast already now?
Yes. Yes, it's basically the opposite of sales. Next thing that you do, you need to have an emergency fund. Now that depends on if you've been working in Switzerland and how long you've been working in Switzerland, on how large that needs to be. Also, it depends on how much you love your job. Like if you don't really like your job right now or you really hate your boss, which can happen, right? In Switzerland, we have the unemployment monies that will be paid as of a certain point. Also, it will be paid to a certain extent. And that kind of influences on how much emergency fund you would need to have, right? So if you have a normal job that pays you and you've like worked in there for a certain amount of time already, 1.5 years, let's say, then you only need about 3 to 4 months of emergency fund. And I would do that from your spending, not from your income. I would do 3 to 4 months from your spending, then make sure that you're doing your 3A contributions.
Why is that important?
Because you can deduct it from your taxes. And you definitely should max that out. Usually people earn more than a certain amount, which means that they then pay more than, let's say, 3,000 francs of taxes. And If you're below the 3,000 francs of taxes, then it might make sense to not pay in the entire 3A. But if you are above that, which I think most of us are, you kind of hit that threshold fairly quickly. It's extremely important that people don't stop there. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of, and this is especially us women, we were taught to save.
Yes, very much so.
It's so annoying. That is so annoying. It's obviously paying into the right organization is kind of like quite crucial as well.
You already see my face like, oh, I want to know what is the right organization.
Yes, well, it's more the type of product that you're choosing. I would like to have people choose fintech products. If generally fintech products allow you to invest at a very at your own risk level. So there's usually about 10 different strategies. And then you can decide which one you feel comfortable with. A mistake that I see often is that they have the time horizon to invest and they're not actually going at the speed that they should be going. I always have this picture that I use with cars on motorways and how fast they should be going, depending on where you're trying to get to and how far that goal is away. So they're not using the right amount of speed.
Because you would say simply the investment is way too risk averse.
Yes, that's the thing that women do. They're too risk averse because they don't understand maybe investing that well yet.
By understanding time horizons, you mean, for example, how many years do I plan to work until retirement or something else?
Yes, it's more like how many years do you have until you're actually going to be retired?
Okay, but
so
I guess that number is also going to move in the future.
Yes, it is. And that is that's extremely correct what you just said. This is a moving target at the end of the day. So it's about understanding when do you need which money. And understanding that not all your money is one pot of money.
Nadine, but about 3A, is that all that I need to know?
No, it goes a lot further than that. Ooh, so now we get into the really meaty bit of things. In the 3A, it depends on if you need a life insurance or not.
Why? And who needs a life insurance?
Most people need a life insurance, but most people have an insurance that is not actually right for them.
In what sense?
Okay, that is a historical thing. When this entire system was set up, we used to be in war times. So the system is catered to make sure that if you have an accident, that you're properly secured. Therefore, in that moment, it oftentimes pays up to about 90% of your salary, depending a bit on where your salary levels are at. You should only work with covering the risk part. If it's a spouse that doesn't have a second pillar because they were staying home and not working, then in a case of a death, then there's nothing coming from the second pillar. And that's where third pillars, life insurance products come in. So in the disability case and in the death case of these kind of situations. For that, to establish what you actually need, a professional would do an analysis. Now careful, because if you ain't paying for it, then you are the product. The insurance has no, if they're doing it for free, this analysis, they have no incentive to give you the actually best product that makes the most sense for you. But they will put a savings part into that life insurance, which is for old age, retirement. But that is extremely expensive. But because you're not paying for the actual analysis, they will by default put it in. Even if you're paying for it, sometimes they put it in because that's where they're earning money.
I see.
Because the savings part, it comes with usually 4 or 5% of fees. And that's mega high.
That's almost like the credit card debt.
If you've already passed the 5 years, then sometimes it doesn't really make sense to go and restructure it.
Danger zone, always think twice.
Oftentimes you can also restructure in a pre-existing life insurance.
When it comes to financial advice, or not financial advice, but questions regarding financial literacy. Do you see any other, especially for women-specific issues that you see quite often happening? I don't want to say mistakes because, maybe there was a situation where a woman got into because of the different circumstances. So this is not necessarily a mistake, but the situations which you see problematic, and maybe what women don't usually think about.
So most people are worried about retirement. Make sure that like you can age in grace as well, because you have a 30-year vacation coming towards you very soon. Like, it's coming. And most people cannot go on vacation or cannot stop working straight away now. And that's basically what's going to happen. Yes, you'll have a first pillar that will be paying old age pensions, and you'll hopefully have a second pillar as well, not a third pillar.
Exactly.
The third pillar, that when it's paying pensions, then it is usually a life insurance, and that's the part that we are trying to avoid having in our portfolios. But you have a third pillar that you can extract and then have those assets to continue investing and continue consuming as well. There's this like notion out there that you need to fill up your 3A account up until like 50 or 100,000 francs before you open a second one. And I have no idea where that notion came from, but it sticks in people's minds so badly. And it's not good, because in terms of taxes, you can start extracting the 3A 5 years before you go into retirement. But because you can only extract the full account.
That's why it doesn't make sense to only have one account which you populate.
Therefore, you need to have different accounts. Preference 5.
But why 5? Or is it just a
because
just a
you
ballpark?
have the 5 years.
Oh, yes,
ballpark.
right. Oh, yeah.
I always used to say 10. Because in Canton Zurich, you're allowed to have as many as you want.
The fintech providers that you are mentioning, can you actually disclose the ones that you would recommend?
Oh, there are so many players out there. There's a couple of players that I really love working with. I prefer to play with like FinPension, for example, because the FinPension you need to figure out the social system that you're in. And then after that, you can, once the 7,000 is like fully filled every year, and you have a savings rate of say 10,000 a year, then you have an additional 3,000 that you can put into a solution, right? Now, the question is which solution works the best for you. If you're going to be going with a broker account and then investing it yourself on a monthly basis with an auto invest, or if you're going to go auto invest over a robo solution.
And you would suggest to be greedy here, greedy in the sense that, even 0.2% makes a difference in the scale of your whole life.
Yes, absolutely. Like if you educate yourself and you're kind of like understanding like what you're holding out for, and you set it up once properly, then you can just fly with that solution. I would not go down rabbit holes to like manage too many different like 0 point something percentages, because it also depends a little bit on your age and your wealth. We're trying to optimize that they're even starting, right? And then from there, we need to make sure that a lot more money comes into the system. And that has to do with other skills. You need to like be able to get more salary. So you need to negotiate. You need to merge with AI so that you can show people that you're worthy of keeping in the workforce.
That sounds so brutal, but it is actually true. And I completely am on the same page with you. And that actually was something I wanted to ask you. How do you view the future of the job market and the economy? I understand it's a huge question, but let's say in the next couple of years, I'm not saying like 10 plus years, that would be impossible to ask.
Yeah, I do think people need to merge with AI as fast as they can and to their full ability. And I think they should not shy away from it. Now, my normal tone is always educate yourself, right? And I would say the same for that. A lot of topics you can either learn in one way or another. You can either go off and you can do the self-study way, which means you're going down a podcast, books, YouTube, blogs, and so on path.
And because something is better than nothing.
But you have the other problem, which is you do not actually know what you don't know. So you don't know what you're looking for, and you don't know which parts you haven't understood yet.
I think that's a very important part, Because when you just start with something, you don't understand the whole scope of the topic, the whole universe.
But that's exactly what we're talking about, right? So a study is by default, like it's a curriculum that has been thought through and that has been built up, and there's a flow of information in there to basically all your time and in the free resources is worth something.
I think it just would be unrealistic if we ask everyone now to go to university, become machine learning engineers.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the 4 or 5 years to invest into full-time education for that. So it's just not even something that we can ask from people who want to upskill.
I think a lot of people work in companies or bigger companies, and they have IT departments. So AI is one thing that I think corporations should be teaching you about.
And if they don't teach yourself, find a way, find a course.
Find a way to learn, because if you don't learn it, this might go super sideways for you. And it might go a lot faster than what you think. Well, I have the feeling what's coming is going to be really like interesting. And
I don't like the word interesting.
No, I don't like the word interesting either. And that's exactly why people need to invest. Get like passive investment, like a lot of different asset classes mixed together within the asset class. Make sure that you're super diversified. So that
you're talking ETFs.
You're reducing the risks, yes. ETFs, you are often associated just with stocks, but obviously you have other asset classes that are auto ETF'd, or respectively ETCs, ETNs, but ETCs as well.
You know, one question that probably would be very specific to women. I quite often hear from females that they invest in Hermès bags.
By what?
Hermès.
Oh,
Hermès bags. Hermès bags, or Chanel bags. Something that they believe is an investment because it costs a lot, and there is an expectation, or let's say more of a hope, that it would appreciate in the future. And we were also saying that women are quite often risk averse, but in some cases it feels to me that they are exactly not risk averse, but they're risky investments. Is it even an investment?
I don't think it's necessarily always just like risk averse. It's also sometimes that you don't know better, right? So is a Hermès bag an investment? It really depends on how much assets you have, on if that would make sense to put it in as a diversification.
I've been in crypto for 5 years now, and I have seen people who are obsessively checking their portfolios every, half an hour, or in some periods even faster and even more often. And I just see that this is not representing a happy life.
Yeah. Well, it's compulsory in that moment.
Compulsory, and also the stress levels that you experience when you have to monitor.
I do believe that you should be holding a bit of crypto for sure as well.
I love that you're saying this.
Yes, I think it's just at this stage it's an asset class that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that you should hold all your assets in Bitcoin. I'm saying take it in as a diversification, which means what diversification means is like not more than 5%. That's what the modern portfolio theory says. Yes.
Okay.
But then you need to feel comfortable with that. Okay. But it's interesting because then I've seen other financial educators that run around that say that people should hold like up to 30% in startups of their portfolio.
In startups?
In startups.
How is that?
For me, like mind-boggling.
And then I'm hoping that more people will be, well, first of all, deepening their knowledge.
Yes. Also, do your due diligence on whom you're actually following. Personal finance is a studiable area, and it's literally called financial planning, and it's not even necessarily called like master in finance. Like, it's not necessarily that, because I know a lot of people that have a master in finance that do not actually invest, and that don't actually trickle that knowledge down to their own investments.
That does sound really strange to me.
It is. It's wild, but that's exactly what I encountered in the bank that I used to work in, right? And just because I worked in a bank does not make me an investment advisor. I really became an investment advisor and a financial planner after I left the bank.
think it is very important that you're saying this, so that whenever people are listening to somebody's advice, they do check their credentials and also check it properly. Not talking about diversification in a bit of a different context. What do you think of the concept of portfolio career?
Yes, I mean, that's the different income sources once again. Therefore, I think that's a great idea. I do think it makes sense to have different income sources, because if you lose one job, then you are not in full despair.
That's right. But then my question would be, when somebody is planning to have a portfolio career, so let's say they're not fully 100% employed in one place, but maybe having a part-time employment and a side hustle and something else, you know, what are the aspects of financial planning that people need to consider?
It depends on how they do it. So you're in a different system when you're a solopreneur than if you're an entrepreneur which is employing you yourself. Also, what people don't understand is all the risks that comes with having a GmbH or AG, because there's an accounting burden that you then have, and you need to tackle that, and you're liable. In your solo company, you have other kinds of liabilities that come into play, not just generally for your life and your wealth, but also for like retirement. How are you setting yourself up long term? Oftentimes, if you're only working a certain percentage in a company, you don't get the amount of salary you could get when you're at 80 or 100%. The less percentage you have, the less likely you're going to be promoted.
And that's actually a good point, because current expectation is that you get promoted every couple of years. And I was also thinking that in this economy that we are entering, maybe being promoted every 2 years is not a realistic expectation.
It depends in which company you're in and so on and so forth. And then also, like, it depends on what comes along with promotions. You can also get salary increases without having a promotion. I think what women oftentimes do not do is ask for the salary increase every single year. You need to be prepared when you're doing this, and you need to make sure that you are setting the target, but then not just set and forget, but you set the target and then you check in with your manager once a month. You literally send an email saying, this is like what I've improved this month. This is like what I've accomplished. You summarize stuff. You basically make sure that they cannot not promote you. But it's a process that you need to like manage. And see, that's where time should be going into, and not figuring out where you can possibly like save another 0.01%.
That's a very good point.
Because that 5 minutes that you take every month, or 10 minutes or 15 or even half an hour that it takes you, that's worthy of probably 10-15% more salary every year, and that stuff compounds. And that's what they need to do. They need to set it up, and then they need to make sure that they're putting their energy into like high leveraged activities and skill building after that.
I am really hoping for all of our listeners that they will be collecting the evidence every month, having the emails with everything that they have accomplished, and then getting those raises. 10% you said every year, that would be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. Then if you're not getting the 10%, you should at least ask for the inflation adjustment.
The official numbers that we're getting, do you believe that this is the real inflation or not?
Oh, great question. Yeah, honestly, actually, you should calculate it yourself on what your personal inflation really is, because the products that you're consuming might be very different to other people's products. So because they do it according to a certain basket of products.
So Nadine, when it comes to women,
yes,
in particular in Switzerland, we have covered the topic of course, taking time off for the childcare. We discussed also the part-time work that it has certain, let's say, dangers in terms of all the different pension schemes and so on. But I think there is also one danger, or one female-specific topic that I have not heard many people speak about, and that is that nowadays women get their first children or get children at a much later stage in life than previous generations. And also I can see it in my generation, in millennials. What is also the, let's say, the hidden costs of that trend?
That people start too late. they usually then encounter a lot more fertility problems, and therefore will be spending a heck of a lot more money to like solving that. So also having possibly a diversified strategy when it comes to that and like risk managing it is a good idea. I also had to like risk manage that situation for my own life a while back, and I definitely would have saved myself a lot of money if I would have just had like my egg freezing done a lot earlier in my life. Somehow there's also this belief around that you should be doing it when you're like 35. I think that's wrong. I would do it way earlier than that.
I did this at 30, so
Yes.
actually
Good.
31 now that I calculated. And I would say that in terms of risk management, I think it was my best decision of the year.
Very good. It definitely takes off the pressure a bit. But I mean, we also know that it can also be that nevertheless doesn't solve the problem, right? If you have these frozen eggs. But it's definitely, the younger you are, the more healthy your eggs are. And if you go through one round of freezing when you're, say, even like 28 or even 25, that will cost you probably about 4,500. If you do it early on, you'll get a lot of eggs out in one go. If you wait, like I did, then you start having less eggs in one go, and therefore you get to do this process many times, which then means that you're going to be spending so much more money. And
you know, it is kind of frustrating that in 2025, now 2026, if people are listening to us later, there still are so many taboos around the topics of finance, topics of childcare and so on, that we are still in the trap of having this maybe unwanted misrepresentations of realities just because we are too shy to speak about these things. Even in the times when we have all the access to actually talking to people, and you know, social media, at least that is supposed to be one of the good aspects of social media.
There's a lot of shame around like having to have had help to have become like pregnant. I think there's shame around that topic.
And I can't even understand why would that be shameful. When you have a back pain, you go to the doctor. Also, I think it's important to remember that without visiting a doctor, you cannot yourself predict how many eggs you have left. Nadine, actually have now completely a different question maybe. I know this will always be the answer, something like it depends. But what would be generally, you say, the money that we should be investing in proportion to the salary or to the income better? The money that you would say for your operational cost of your life, what should be the proportion? And then how much money would you say it is fine to allocate on just, trips, entertainment, buying myself new jewelry and, everything that probably wouldn't be the asset?
Yes, it is a depends question because it depends on your salary level. But generally what you can say in Switzerland is, let's say that you have about 10 to 15% taxes. So I will put about 10, 15% away for investing. So you're talking about 30% of your salary already allocated to tax and investing. And then we're talking consumption and just like the daily things that you need, as well as then the fluctuating consumption. 10% is nothing for someone that earns, say, like 350,000 francs a year, That's like 35,000 francs. Those clients that I have, I can see them like saving about 100,000 easily a year, easily, if not more, 150.
This is what I wish to all of our listeners at some point in life.
And then it becomes a different percentage. So then you definitely need to have fun money.
Fun money.
Yes, because otherwise you're not going to stick to the system for a very long time. But we haven't really talked about the legal topics that are also part of risk management of your personal situation.
I'm happy that you're bringing it up because for the legal questions, it can get very expensive in Switzerland.
Yes.
I actually myself, I do have the legal protection.
I advise everyone to have one. As soon as you start working, it makes sense to have a legal protection anything that can like financially really disrupt you is things that you should have an eye on, and that you have somewhat protection around it. That's why disability insurance, death insurance, but I don't necessarily think you should have a phone insurance.
And what about...
Because that you should financially be able to cope with.
True. What about household insurance?
Yes, absolutely.
I remember I have actually used mine a couple of times.
Me too.
And Nadine, thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's super nice to see you physically and to having spent this time with you. I love your energy.
Me. Our dear listeners, remember, you have to start somewhere and start now, because this feeling of urgency is going to evaporate if you don't take action.
Oh, yes. It will take you 48 hours to evaporate.
You've heard it, 48 action. Hours.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have the first 24 hours after like an input are the most crucial. And then your motivation plummets from there.
So, as we said, take action and stay or become financially healthy.
Yes.